Thank you all for thank you all for being here. It's hot, it's late, and you do the work of the angels, I have to tell you. Sometimes I have trouble sleeping at night, and then I think of people like you and what you're doing. So I so appreciate it. Let me introduce you to me because I need to give you reasons to listen to me for the next hour. And that is, I'm a psychiatric nurse. I retired after 43 years of psychiatric nursing, doing a whole lot of different things. Certainly, about half of my career, I managed acute psychiatric folks with acute psychiatric issues, but I also became an expert in communications, and especially communications. I taught communications to behavioral health specialists, who I might tell you are not taught how to do that in school. And as importantly, to medical experts who don't know how to identify behavioral health issues amongst their patients. So if you're dealing with somebody with diabetes, they have a 25% chance of being depressed. How do you ask somebody with diabetes if they're depressed and suicidal? So I also managed telephone banks and crisis banks, and managed all sorts of phone outreach programs. So I've consolidated some of those thoughts that I thought would be helpful in making calls to our constituents and trying to convince them of something or engage them in something. And I put together some thoughts that Susan and her gang have found helpful in the last 8 years we've been doing this. I can't believe that. I wish we didn't have to keep doing this, but we do until we get it right. So I hope to share some of those tricks that have been tried, and people seem to find them useful, and I hope to share them with you today. So that's why you should listen for the next hour. First is, what are the basics of communications? We're going to talk about goals. We're going to talk about listening. That is your superpower, listening. We keep thinking we're making phone calls so we can talk to people. No, you're making phone calls so you can find out what's on their mind and listen to them. We're going to talk about asking questions, and we're going to talk almost the second half is about motivating voters. When people don't act in their own best behavior, us telling them what to do doesn't work, but there are many things that do work, and we're going to talk about those. So, firstly, let's talk a little bit about success. How do we judge success? I've always said that I'm a great communicator as long as I know what it is I'm trying to communicate. I'm really bad when I'm unclear as to what I'm trying to do. What are you trying to do when you're calling people? How do you measure your success? And I recommend to you that you measure your success by your own behavior. How many phone calls did I make? How many times did I engage somebody in a conversation? How many hours did I spend on the phone bank? Very specific behaviors that you have entire 100% control over. So if I said I was going to be making phone calls for an hour and I did that, well, damn if I wasn't successful. So your elements of success need to be in your control and very observable behaviors that you can exhibit. Very limited, very reasonable, and also know that the folks that you're calling are being touched by other people as well. So it is a cumulative effect that we have on people. So I just recommend that you be really, really clear about what it is you can really have control over and accomplish. And what you don't have control over is other people's behavior. You can influence it, you can speed up their behavior change, you can have an impact, but you can't control it. So your goals need to be specific to you. And some of these things are very simple. You showed up. Showing up, attendance counts every single time. Showing up is the most important thing you could do. Did you do what you wanted to do? Did you meet all those criteria that you set up for yourself? Did you ask the requisite questions that you were supposed to for this particular campaign? Did you use open-ended questioning? Did you listen to the answers? And then did you elicit information about their issues, voting patterns, registration, whatever it is the purpose of your calls are supposed to be with whatever campaign you're doing? Those are the things that you have control over. So before you get on the phone each and every time, sit down with yourself and say, self, what do I want to accomplish today? Write them down. At the end of the hour, when you're pulling your hair out and you think you didn't make a darn bit of difference, make sure you look and see, you know what? I was very successful today. I did everything I wanted to do. And the rest will take care of itself. The basic styles of communication are these. We need to be empathic and respectful and collaborative and accepting. Now, all this seems to go without saying. Who isn't empathic, respectful, collaborative, accepting? Very often we aren't. Certainly I'm not. I have opinions. I have strong opinions. I feel passionate about this world that we're living in and the threat that our democracy is under. That doesn't leave a whole lot of room sometimes for empathy, respect, collaboration, being accepting. You are not imposing your passion on people. You are receiving what they have to say. And that's a very difficult position to be in, but it's very useful. We can elicit information. We avoid authoritarianism. You are not the expert on the world, and that's perfectly wonderful. You don't have to be. Anytime we have an authoritarian or we know what somebody needs to do and should do, that person will dig in their heels. And that's called a power struggle. We have one going on in our world right now. Don't try to convince somebody what they're supposed to do. They will dig in their heels and not do it. We explore with people rather than extort them to action. And we support them rather than persuading them. A lot of your campaigns use the word persuade. I hate that word. And you'll learn more about why that is as we go along. Let's talk about that first piece of communication that's so important to you folks when you're making phone calls, and that's engagement. This is your first chance to connect with somebody. It's your first chance. You've got 2 seconds. You know what that 2 seconds feels like when you're trying to get somebody on the phone and keep them on the phone. So whatever your engagement technique is, and it has to be unique to you, must be simple and as brief as possible. And you might have an elevator speech. You know what an elevator speech is. You've got to go from floor one to floor 3, and you've got people in there and you need them to know something really quick. So you have to have your act together in terms of what you want to tell them. Your elevator speech in terms of engagement must be exquisitely brief and concise. You have to include your explicit purpose for the call. You may even list the expectations you have of your target and for yourself. I want to talk to you about voting in the next election. I only need 1 minute of your time. You can expect me to talk about voting. I can expect you to give me 1 minute of your time. What is the contract? Very quickly. Include any value this might be to the target. Close the deal. That is, I need 1 minute of your time. I hope I can have it. Close that deal. And it's important for you to be organic. They have to be your words, your personality. If there are, let's see, there are how many people? There's 38 participants on this Zoom call. I expect there to be 38 different elevator speeches because you are such unique individuals, and it has to be who you are and what's organic to you. Use your personality, your observations, your understanding of your own goals, what you're trying to accomplish, and be as genuine as you can possibly be. And I appreciate how hard that can be when you're doing call after call after call. So just as an example, we have somebody here. Natalie, are you with us?
I am.
I understand you've got a pretty good opener yourself. What do you look? I mean, you guys have them. I don't do most of these calls. You've got all the experience. What's your favorite?
So when I call someone, I make sure, first of all, that I'm smiling before I start talking, because smiling changes how your voice sounds.
Yeah.
So it's a very intentional thing I do. I smile very bigly. Bigly, is that a word? So
now.
it is now. And typically what I'll say is, hi, is this so-and-so? Wait for confirmation that it is in fact so-and-so that I'm calling. And then I'll say, oh, great, my name's Natalie, and I just had two really quick questions for you today. It'll take about 30 seconds. Do you have 30 seconds for me?
Oh, damn. That's perfect.
Yeah, that's the opener.
Great. How does it work as a rule?
As a rule, even if people are super busy, 9 times out of 10, 30 seconds is not going to stop them from walking out the door, getting their keys, doing
Right.
whatever else they're doing. They feel like 30 seconds is enough time they can answer two questions.
Uh-huh.
It's never a 30-second conversation, but that gets me to my first question. And then I can say, oh, well, based on your response, actually, I have another question. So I'm not necessarily being deceitful. I'm just saying that there's two questions. If you answer the first one, I can just get straight to the second one. But if you answer the first one in a certain way, I need to give you a little more context before I can get on to the second one. But I always have the two questions that I want to ask. It may take more than two questions to get to the answers that I need.
Right, right. I think that's perfect. You hit all the buttons. It's very brief. I love that you smile. They can't see you, but you smile. You're right. It changes the tone of your voice when you're smiling and welcoming. Hi, my name is, that's perfect. No big to do. It's brief. You have a purpose, you give them a time frame, and you close the deal. Just a few quick declarative sentences with a question at the end. Is that okay? Are you going to do that? I love that. That's absolutely perfect. It takes no time at all, and it hits all the marks on our list here. I suspect it's also very organic to who you are. It's your style. Somebody else would do it their own way, own it in a very different way, and it would sound very differently, and that's perfectly wonderful. Thank you, Natalie. I appreciate that. If we had a 4-hour session, I would like to hear more of your comments because I always learn something from you when we do that. Just as an aside, I'm going to be going to several of the debriefings after your phone banking, and I think we'll have an opportunity to talk about what works and what doesn't work. That's one of the things we can discuss. Let me talk for a minute about scripts. I hate scripts. They're horrible. I haven't seen a good one yet. Now, you have campaigns that you're working on that have some requirements, and I want to respect those requirements as you need to respect those requirements. But there's nothing to say that your opening, your elevator speech has to be that horrible script. In fact, I absolutely recommend that you do not use a script. And even if there are contents in the scripts that you need to use, put it in your own words, make it your own, and customize it. So I'll give you an example of something that happened to me just this week. I got a call from St. Jude's Hospital, which I have been supporting for every single month for 30 years. I love them. Apparently they love me. And they called me to ask me for more money. Now, I answered the phone partly because I like to answer the phone to see how these things go. And they did everything wrong. And the biggest thing they did wrong was they insisted upon using a long, very long script about how important the work is and how much my money has benefited this research and that research and this bullshit and that. And I just blew it. I was a willing partner. I was willing to give them more money. But I was so irritated by the time I listened, and I stopped the script about midway through. This poor guy. I'm not an easy person to call. And I stopped the script and I said, please, I appreciate what you're doing. Thank you for it. And just tell me what you want of me. And I can say yes or no. And he said, we want $10 a month more. And I said, no. I might have said yes had he engaged me in a conversation. Had he started like you, Natalie, had he started by saying, my name is Jeff, is this Kathy? We're so grateful to you for the years you've contributed to us. I'd like to talk to you about future contributions. And I would have been there. And $10 a month extra might have even considered it. I might even go back and give it to him, but not because of that phone call. So scripts are important. The content may be important. If you have to use some of that content, use it later in your conversation if you can. And please do not read anything on the phone, because just like they can hear your smile, they can hear your reading. Okay. We're doing pretty good. We're going to get this over in 45 minutes. Okay, we're going to ask some questions now. How do you ask questions? That's really important, how you ask questions. Closed questions, there's a place and a time for closed-ended questions. It has a limited reply and it's required and very efficient in many circumstances. You go to the doctor and they ask you, you have diabetes? Do you have liver disease? Do you have chronic headaches? And you say yes or no. That's fine, but not when you want to engage somebody in conversation. Are you a registered Democrat? That's a closed-ended question. Might be an appropriate question. Are you intending to vote on Tuesday? That's a closed-ended question. Very appropriate question, but it's not going to give you much information. When you want to ask an open-ended question is if you care about the answer, you're going to ask an open-ended question. It communicates our desire to understand what's on people's mind, and it communicates the respect for the individual. Had that young man engaged me in conversation with some open-ended questions, I know you've been a donor to St. Jude's for many, many years. Can you tell me something about why you're engaged in our organization? That means he's interested in me, not delivering his speech. It nets much richer conversation. And Natalie, you also said something else that I really appreciated, that the answer to your question informs what you're going to ask and do next. You can't always guarantee that a call is going to be X amount of time, because you're always informed by what it is they just told you. So if you didn't hear what they just told you, or if you didn't ask an open-ended question, your conversation's pretty short. If you ask open-ended questions, you've got a conversation. And people respect that, and they respond to it. So here, I'll just ask you, just for the sake of fun and something to do, because you're sitting here doing nothing for an hour. Put your hand out. If you think this is a closed-ended question, give me a fist. If you think it's an open-ended question, give me a palm. And they're not so easy to decipher. I'm going to say, where did you grow up? Is that an open or closed-ended question? That's a closed-ended question. Ironically, it's an open-ended question. It has a short answer, but it is an open-ended answer. Would you care to answer a few questions? That's a yes or no. Is that an open-ended or closed question? That's a closed question. It's certainly a reasonable question. It closes the deal. I have some questions for you, should only take a few seconds. Are you willing to listen to them? Yes or no? That's fine. Aren't you interested in climate? Oops. Aren't you interested in climate change? No, I'm not interested in climate. I have to say, I know people can sometimes criticize. Yes, suicide is not a funny thing, but I used to work on a suicide hotline, and somebody would tap me on the back and say, they'd have a question, and I'd hear them saying, I'm the one that listens to the calls for quality's sake. And how many times I listen to, you're not suicidal, are you? Please, you're not suicidal, are you? Because I don't want to hear the real answer. I hate those things. Aren't you interested in climate change? Don't you think it's important to vote? Just put a comma after those sentences and say, you idiot. Aren't you interested in, that kind of, there's something about that gets me. Help me understand your concerns. Is that a closed or open question? That's very open. In fact, it's not even in question. It's help me understand your concerns. Are you going to vote on Tuesday? Open or closed? Closed. Appropriate, but closed. Is this an open or closed question? It is a closed question. So just think about the kinds of questions that you are going to ask people, and think about those in advance as to what's important and how you might want to ask them. I was working with some psychologists one day, and we were talking about how they ask open and closed questions. And unfortunately, one of them says to me, I know the difference between an open and closed-ended question. I haven't got time to ask an open-ended question. And I won't express what I said in response to that. So that's asking questions. But asking questions is absolutely a pointless exercise without listening to the answer. And that's where the real skill comes in. I know, I can count on one hand, maybe not even that much, the people that I know in my life who are excellent listeners. Think about your own life. Think about who are good listeners, and think about what makes them so. So, notes about listening. Firstly, indeed, we are given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a very good reason. We don't need more than 1 mouth. God help us if we had 2. But we have 2 ears to listen intently. We need to listen with presence and patience. And let me say a note about patience. Not my forte. I'm one of the most impatient people I ever met. But if you really want to listen to somebody, you've got to sit on your impatience and sit on your passion and sit on your damn opinions. And that's the hardest thing you can do. Listen with your eyes, with your ears, and with your heart, empathically. Listen with acceptance and non-judgment. And that's difficult, very difficult. Listen with curiosity. You really want to know what people think and feel. And listen with delight. I want to know about you. And listen without interruptions. A very common trait that we all do, I do it all the time, is when somebody's telling a story, I'm thinking of the story that I'm going to tell right after that's over. Or if I'm really impatient, I'll interrupt them and tell them one better. And that's a common trait, and it's one that, oh God, I work on in myself, to be patient and listen and not think of what I'm going to say next. Use encouragers. I see, go on, really, those kinds of things, especially since you're on the phone. They can't see your face nodding. They can't see your smile on your lips. They can't hear, oh, I see, yes. Can you explain that more? Tell me more. Tell me more, tell me more. And I have homework for you. It's good homework. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Kelly Corrigan. Is she the best thing since ketchup? She is, Jesus, she's good. She makes Terry Gross look like a bad interview. And Terry Gross is great. I'm a big Terry Gross fan. But if you want to hear a really great interview, and if you're not familiar with Kelly Corrigan, even the sounds, the names of her shows. Tell Me More is a show. Kelly Corrigan Wonders is a show. Even the names of her show suggests I'm going to listen to you. And she listens like nobody I have ever heard on any kind of a TV or radio program. So I'm saying this very sincerely. You want to know how to interview somebody? Celeste, you probably know her as well, and she is just beyond belief. Okay, Helen, I'm gonna pick on you. Are you with us here? Okay, Helen, we're just gonna play a little bit about asking open and closed-ended questions and seeing where it gets us and the differences it can produce in a conversation. So Helen, I'm gonna ask you about a summer vacation you've had recently.
Okay.
So I understand you went on a summer vacation. Where did you go?
I went to Botswana.
Botswana. Did you have a good time?
I had a fabulous time.
Did you go to Botswana in the fall?
No, I went to Botswana actually last month.
Oh,
okay. At the beginning of June.
Did you go by yourself?
No, I went with a friend.
Okay.
travel together.
That's very nice. And when you were in Botswana, how many days did you say you went?
I didn't say, I was there for 10 days. I was in Botswana and we were in Zimbabwe for 3 days.
So 10, 11, 13 days you were there.
Days.
And it took you a long time to get there, I'm assuming.
Oh, it took a really long time to get there. And
Okay.
so it was obviously a long time to get home too.
This is getting boring. And we know that Botswana was not boring.
Right, it wasn't.
Okay, let's have another conversation, Helen. Tell me about your vacation.
So the vacation was not boring. It was very exciting. And we went to 3 different camps in Botswana, to 3 different locations in the Okavango Delta and Chobe, so that we could go on game drives and see the various natural animals and the terrain in Botswana in 3 different locations.
Wow, you got around, didn't you?
Yeah, we did. We definitely got around.
What was the favorite thing? What was your favorite part of the trip?
It's really hard to say because
Uh-huh.
each time I went somewhere, I thought, this is my favorite part.
Uh-huh.
And then the next place I went, I thought, no, this is my favorite part. So I just really enjoyed traveling around in a Jeep and seeing all of the animals,
Uh-huh.
the guides. And I also enjoyed learning a lot about it from the various guides that took us around.
It sounds wonderful.
Yeah, it definitely was. It was
I wish
very
I was with
exciting.
you. I'd love to do that. Okay, thank you, Helen. It sounds like a wonderful trip, and I'd like to hear more about it. But as I said, we've only got an hour. So, but that sounds wonderful. So to hit you over the head with the obvious, there was 2 conversations. Which one was the most interesting to you? And as a participant, Helen, what was your experience of the 2 conversations?
Well, the one that was more fun for me and interesting was when I got to talk about what I did there and what was my favorite parts. So that was more interesting to me, and it was fun because I get to relive the experience every time I start to talk about it.
So as a conversant, it's more rewarding to be able to express yourself more openly and clearly, and that was a fun trip, and you got to express that.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So I've hit you over the head with the obvious. If you want to ask and understand something about somebody, ask them an open-ended question and listen with delight, because that was easy to listen to with delight. And I love to be in Botswana. It's certainly more challenging if you'd have gone to someplace I didn't care a whit about, or was, you went to visit the prisons in someplace in Alabama. I might not have been so delighted, but certainly interested. But thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. I'm going to stop here very briefly. Any comments or questions, please put them in chat, and folks will take those. Because I've been talking a lot and very, very rapidly. So let's take a minute to take a breather and see what thoughts you have that of note.
This is Margaret, and while we're waiting for any questions that people have, please put them in chat. I have this is so timely, Kathy, because we are people are beginning to get very excited about the election and energized, and so we have a lot of new people coming to our phone banks, and training them with a script that isn't perfect is teaching people just what you're telling us, is making it our own, is not always easy. One question that I had is, what do you do when you come up with a silence? It's when there's a silence in a conversation, it's sometimes something we want to fill. And we don't want the other person to be uncomfortable.
Sure.
So that was one question I had. And the second one was one of the questions on our scripts these days for California 22 and 13 has a good intention. It asks us to ask people what issues are important to them. And sometimes that puts people on the spot because we've just called them, they don't know us, and we're asking them, we're trying to get into a conversation. have you got any suggestions for us on either of those two things?
Well, firstly, the silences, when they say silence are golden, silence is golden, it really is. And we have a tendency to want to fill it because of our discomfort more than theirs. So I can't tell you exactly what to do to ease their discomfort, but ease your own discomfort. Be
Yeah.
patient with, when you listen to a lot of interviewers, they'll often ask double questions. They'll say something like, what was the favorite part of your trip? Did you really like the Jeep rides especially? Now, if you really want to be curious, you just ask the one question, because they're going to answer the last question you asked. They're going to ask about the Jeep rides. They're going to respond to the Jeep rides. But it's because I'm anxious and want to give them some data to respond to that I give them double questions. And that's often what fills silence. When people are quiet, let them be quiet.
Yeah.
As long as you're comfortable with that. And if you think you've lost them or they didn't hear the question, you might repeat it. The same question, not another one, maybe paraphrase it. So be patient with yourself and manage your own anxiety.
That's what we need to do. I love your idea, the idea of asking two questions. There are some questions in chat now. Some that I'm not, I think they fit in. Someone has just asked, how do I get past that feeling of pressure to engage? I'd like to hear, this person wants to learn more hooks to get people engaged. And I think we all have that desire.
Yeah, that everybody wants to do it. Everybody feels like, and feels like a failure if you weren't able to do it. I mean, how many phone calls? You've got these machines making these phone calls. You're going to churn out tons and tons of phone calls. You're going to have another chance to try something different, try something new. That's the other thing I want to remark about your elevator speech. You can try things. Don't work, toss them out. Try something else. The pressure is a problem, and trying to manage your own anxiety, once again, not just like the silence. Take a deep breath, speak clearly in a conversational tone like you would anybody else you call. There'll always be another phone call. If you don't help them, there's another one.
That is such a great idea to try out, for people to try out their personal approach several times, especially new callers, until they're feeling comfortable. Susan, if we have a little more time, there's a question that we've been all been working on from the beginning, is how to talk to people who say, I don't vote. It's a little bit like you're saying, aren't you interested in climate change? We don't want to say, don't you know why it's important? But just any comment you would like to give on that, because we're coming across that unbelievably this year.
Well, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about at the latter part of these slides. It's what do you do when people don't do something that makes all the sense in the world? Are you kidding me? Are you an idiot? You don't vote. So we're going to be talking about that. So let's say that.
Perfect.
I'm going to move on. So if I didn't get to your question, I apologize. We'll see if we can get them to the end.
Oh, this is good. Thank you.
Okay. So listening reflectively, I think I don't want to hit on this too much. But what I was doing a bit with Helen in the last call was also listening reflectively. Make a reasonable guess as to what somebody's saying and feed it back to them. Oh, it sounds like you were really all over the place in Botswana, weren't you? That was a reflective listening. She can clarify it if I'm wrong, and she can add to it. It'll keep the conversation going. Give voice to it in a statement. Don't ask a whole lot of additional questions. You can get a lot of information by, oh, that sounds very exciting. Oh, yes, it was because, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to skip over some of that stuff. We're going to skip this. I can do 8 hours on empathy. And the only thing I'll say about empathy is, as I've mentioned several times before, and I'll hit you over the head one more time with it, we're doing this work because of our passion and our anxiety about our democracy. And I respect each and every one of you for having that passion and willingness to do this kind of work. And empathy requires that you listen and try to understand somebody else and their passions and what makes them tick or not tick. And that requires imagination, not necessarily a like experience. So if I tell somebody who just lost their child, I know how you feel. Nope. I don't know how you feel. I can imagine how you feel. Oh, that just must be so horrible. I've got to be sincere and honest and use my imagination, not own the feeling. And that's why I say we can spend 8 hours on empathy, because this is a concept that's very difficult for some and very easy for others. But empathy requires that we listen to them, not that we lecture them about what it is we're feeling. Okay, now we're going to get to the motivating behavior, motivating somebody who doesn't want to vote. So let's get into that. What are the challenges that you confront often? I don't vote. That's a very common, I don't vote. There's no use in my voting. It's all rigged anyway. My vote doesn't count. The process is rigged. I don't know enough about the issues to vote. So those are common issues that you have to deal with all the time. And what we commonly do in response to those, and we're all in very good company, I don't vote. Don't you know your vote's important? My vote doesn't count. Oh, every vote counts. The process is rigged. Oh, it's not. We're very honest in this country. The more somebody says something and you make a counter argument, the more they're going to stick with their position to begin with. So countering I don't vote with a lecture about voting rights is counterproductive. It's not only not productive, it's counterproductive. I don't know enough about the issues to vote. Well, I do, let me tell you, because I'm smarter than you are and you're an idiot. So all I'm asking you to do is to let people be who they are and be patient with their process. So here's some typical questions. Can we count on you to vote on Tuesday? It's a yes or no question. It gives them an easy out. It provides limited and useful information. That's fine. Why not? I'm going to ask you, don't use why not in your conversations with pretty much anybody ever again. Get rid of that. Why not is a challenging question, and it stimulates a defensive response, even if you're in total agreement with each other. People will defend against why not. And then we start asking 20 questions, like I did with Helen's trip. You know, did you go on a Tuesday? Did you go with your husband? Did you go alone? Do you need a ride? Are you not voting because you need a ride? Or I'm going to guess all the questions, all the answers that you might have to your ridiculous behavior. I'd like to urge you to vote. You can make a difference. Yeah, right. They don't believe you. So you can let those things go. But what do you do instead? Instead, you understand behavior and behavior change. People usually behave in their own interests. Sometimes that's slow going. So what is good for me or for somebody I love? Usually I will change. It might take years, depends on the issue, depends on the behavior. We use this behavior, people who are alcoholics, they will change. I hope they're alive by the time they do. So eventually, people tend to act in their own best interest, eventually. They'll act in ways that's consistent with their own moral compass. It's consistent with their own good. It's consistent with who they are. And when the positive consequences outweigh the negative, they will change. However, sometimes behavior change, it's normal and it occurs naturally, and most change is self-motivated. People make positive change all the time. I quit smoking, made positive change all the time without anybody's intervention. Intervention is only required if the rate of change is too slow and or it causes negative consequences are too great. So we can stimulate behavior change and speed it up if they're at a point in the continuum of behavior change that allows them to hear an intervention or to experience something new that has an open mind. And this will be clear in a minute. Sometimes people don't act in their own self-interest for whatever reason. They don't vote. Why do you not vote? It's only good for you to vote. Sometimes behavior is unhealthy, like smoking, overeating, not taking your medications. Sometimes people are willing to accept the negative consequences. They're willing to live with Donald Trump as their president. That's okay with them. They're not motivated to change. They don't care. Those people we're probably not going to touch. I mean, every time you say you would think that, or don't you know, when you've got a friend or somebody who is behaving in a way that doesn't seem to be in their own best interest, you say to yourself, you would think that they would know that by now, or they're an intelligent person, or certainly they know better than that. What are they thinking? Well, you know what? They're not thinking. What keeps them from acting in their own best interest is conflict. I want to vote, but I don't like the choices. They're ambivalent. Sometimes the balance of equal values keep people stagnant. I like to smoke and I know it's not healthy, but I like it. It relaxes me. There are benefits to smoking. And I know it's not healthy, so they're stagnant. They can't change because they're stuck between two opposing forces. There might be barriers. I'd like to vote, but I'm afraid the lines will be too long. That doesn't happen in California, thank God, but it does happen elsewhere, or they don't have access, or I can't get off work, or whatever the barriers are that they may be facing. Or they're not ready or willing to change. Now, I won't go into this any detail, but there are 5 stages of change. And if somebody's at this low end of the spectrum and you call them and they say, I'm 75 years old and I have never voted once in my life and I don't intend to again, you wish them a happy day. It has been so nice chatting with you, and I won't bother you any further. They're not going to change. Don't waste your time. Let it go. However, if somebody's willing to come and have a conversation with you and they are not set in their ways, they might be on a stage, they might be at a stage of change that they may be willing to consider some alternatives to their behavior. So think for a minute of yourself and what works and what does not work in your life. When you have a behavior that people around you want to change, what does not work? So when your doctor says you have to lose weight, how does that work for you? Is that a motivating factor? With some people, if they're ready to change and they know it's a problem themselves, it is. What doesn't work is using the word should. When I said, get rid of why not, get rid of that, get rid of should. It has no use in the English language. It has no serious use in the English language. Mm-hmm. You should do this, you should do that, you should do the other thing, you should go where the sun don't shine. So what does not work is telling people what they should do, or anybody telling you what I want you to do. Does not work when it comes to behavior change. What does work? What does work is allowing somebody to evaluate for themselves what makes the most sense for them. And when might they be willing to change? If they are, what needs to happen for that change to take place? What seems to be getting in your way? How can I be of some help? Those things, that encouragement of having somebody explore and express their ambivalence, that works. But I'm going to give you some tools, some super, super simple tools that come from the world of motivational interviewing. And this is a technique that was used with individuals whose behavior has a terrible effect on their health. So those people with substance use disorders, those folks that are addicted, people with diabetes, people with hypertension, where their behavior impacts their health. And if they don't change, they're going to die. So there's a whole type of intervention called motivational interviewing that was established to best be able to motivate or help impact the speed of change. These people may change on their own, but let's hope they live long enough. So if we can speed up that stage of change, then we can help them save their own lives. So it's based on the premise that people have an intrinsic need to change and will act in their own interest. But behavior change must come from within. It cannot be, it can't be persuaded or coercion. Maybe if you want to buy a car and they'll give you a hard sell and you're stupid enough you can buy it, but it doesn't work in the end. You're going to have buyer's remorse. So rather than depend on persuasion and coercion, we look for them to look within themselves for the motivation to change. And there are techniques that can speed it up. And that's what we're going to talk about. I've borrowed 3 techniques from this field that I want you to use, and you can practice it whenever you want. You can practice it at home. You can practice it with your spouses. You can practice them on every phone call that you make. If it doesn't work, fine, make another phone call. There is always another phone call. You'll try things until they work or they don't work and you toss them out. But these things work absolutely beautifully. We can borrow these techniques and we can do things that help us evaluate how likely somebody is to vote, stimulate their intrinsic desire to behave in their own best interest, and know when to cut your losses and hang up the phone. And the first one is this, simply, on a scale from 1 to 5, how likely are you to vote on Tuesday? Notice how different that is from the, are you going to vote on Tuesday? This answer gives us information. How motivated are they to vote? So if they say, I'm a 3 or I'm a 2, I say, I listen. Tell me, what makes that a 2 instead of a 5? I want to understand that. Now I'm going to get information, wonderful information. I'm not putting them on the spot. I'm not making them defensive. I'm interested. Tell me, what makes that a 2? Listen to their answer empathically, openly, without judgment. Seek clarification as you go along with your reflective listening. You've got a conversation. Now, the next question is the killer. What might move you from a 2 to a 5? What's going to happen between now and election day that could move you from a 2 to a 5? That is a wonderful question. The last time I asked that question on a phone call with this group, they said, maybe I'm not a 2 after all. I think I'm a 4. And she clarified it, and she said she was going to vote at the end of the conversation. So we listen to the answer. What's going to make it from a 2 to a 5? And the individual now is making argument for change. Well, we need 2 entirely different candidates. Well, I can't do much about that. So there's things that are going to disclose that they're really not, and they're not really going to change. But 9 out of 10 times, there is really something there to work with that they will work with, not you. What will get you from a 2 to a 5? And now we can listen to those answers and explore their willingness to take those steps that are required to make it a 2 to a 5. We've got a conversation. They are not defensive. They have nothing to defend against you, and they are giving voice to their conflict, to their barriers, to their motivation or lack thereof, to their attitude, to their feelings about the candidates. And now we understand them. But better yet, they understand themselves way better than they did 5 minutes before. So that's technique number 1. Technique number 2 is called the linking summary. This is the tool to help an individual identify their conflicts. What are the conflicting priorities? When you hear that there's conflict, I don't like the vote. I don't like my choices. I like Trump, but I don't like Biden for this reason, whatever the conflicts are. Instead of saying, but, when we reiterate what they're telling us, we use the word and. So that little linking summary ties together what is being said in earlier content. And we use and instead of but when we're summarizing that. So the classic example is, on one hand, you tell me you really, really like to drink. It helps you relax and you don't want to stop. And on the other hand, your wife is going to leave you if you don't stop drinking. I have no judgment about that. All I do is say, on one hand, you're experiencing this. On the other hand, you're experiencing that. And they see the conflict in front of them. But notice the difference when I use, on one hand, you really, really like to drink, but your wife is going to leave you if you don't stop drinking. Does that feel slightly different? It's a bit judgy. On one hand, you like to drink, and on the other hand, your wife is going to leave you. On one hand, you like to drink, but on the other hand, your wife's going to leave you. Which side do you think my prejudices are? I'm voting for the wife. But when you tell that to an alcoholic who has been an alcoholic for 30 years, and they say, give me a sigh of relief, and they say, nobody has understood that before. Nobody has understood me before. So likewise with your voter. On one hand, you hate what's going on in the world today. And on the other hand, you don't want to vote. And just saying it out loud, without any judgment, without any but, without any bias, both have equal value to that person, and let them explain that to you. Let them explain that conflict. And in so doing, they may start giving rise to what we call change talk. So that's number 1. Number 2. Number 3. When you have great ideas and information you want to impart, because you do. You're smart people, you got lots of good information. The candidates, you get all sorts of you got information coming out your ears about what people need to know. But before you give anybody all that great information, remember that unsolicited advice is rarely welcome. Think about mansplaining, and all the men, I apologize to all the men on the call. Don't splain to people. When you splain to people, like I'm doing to you now, when you splain to people, let me explain to you, Lucy. Let me explain to you, you idiot. Let me explain to you because I'm smarter than you are and I have no idea what you already know. So let me explain. Unsolicited advice is never welcome. And your talking points are only riveting to you. You love them. Read them quietly to yourself, your talking points. They are riveting only to you. However, sometimes information is called for. Sometimes somebody says, I don't know the issues at hand. I really don't know the difference between here or that. And you've got information that might be useful. Then you ask their permission. I have some thoughts. I have some information you might find useful. Would you care to see it? Or would you like a link or whatever the case may be? Ask their permission. If you ask their permission, the receiver can say yes or no. And if they do say yes, they're receptive to the content. They're not defending against you. They're interested in what you have to say. They've asked for it. Always ask permission before you give information. You know, I have some thoughts. Sometimes I have an opinion because I'm opinionated. There's nothing wrong with my opinion. I have an opinion on that. I have some thoughts. Would you like to hear them? Yes, I would. No, I wouldn't. Keep them to yourself. That's fine. Either way is fine with me. So 3 things I'm asking you to do. Listen rather than lecture. Ask open, oh, these are 5 things I lied. Ask open-ended questions. Ask scaling questions. And these are they. Use the linking summary when there's conflict and provide information only with permission. And if you're really nice to Susan, she'll send this slide to you and you can cut it out and put it by your computer or phone and remember it. And like I said, you can practice these at home. You can practice them on the phone. There is nothing you can do or say that's dangerous. The worst thing you can do is not listen. The best thing you can do is listen. Try out some new techniques, try out your own elevator speech, try out your scripts. There's no damage, really. You know, I mean, if one doesn't work, try another. Or try it until you get it right, or try it until you're comfortable. And if you're anxious and you're pushing yourself, take a deep breath, slow down, breathe. You're talking faster. It's not going to engage them any faster. You're being your genuine self, like Natalie is, will engage them faster. You're being comfortable with who you are, will engage them more easily. You're being dedicated and passionate. Those are wonderful things. And that's all you really need. And those 5 guidelines. We did. I have to tell you, not only was this a 2-hour lecture, but at one point this was a 4-hour workshop. So I rushed through a tremendous amount of information. And I will ask for a couple more minutes what other questions you might have.